Hello, my name is Emma. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a second year PhD student in the American Culture Studies program at BGSU, and today I'm going to talk about Black female athlete activism. On the 9th of July 2016, members of WNBA team Minnesota Lynx wore black customized t-shirts during a pre-game conference and during warm-up for their game against the Dallas Wings. As a result, 4 white police officers walked off duty and a league-sanctioned fine to players and teams followed suit, as the shirts were perceived to be a violation of the WNBA's warm-up attire policies. The t-shirt nonetheless signified the collective and consistent movement spearheaded by Black female athletes in the fight for social equity. I'll present a brief lit review on Black women in sport and athlete activism, converging the two to look at the commonalities and nuances in the literature. Most importantly, though, I look at what is missing. So above all, sport is a social cultural institution that privileges whiteness, maleness, and straightness. Feminist cultural studies provides a way to identify and interrogate such dynamics, and this is imperative to bring about social equity. At its core, feminist cultural studies analyzes the everyday with gender at the center. It provides a critical framework to ask questions we don't typically ask. In other words, to question the unquestioned. For example, in this case, why were the t-shirts deemed inappropriate and subject to fines? Why are there fines there in the first place? And were the men fined for wearing similar t-shirts? In Black Feminist Thought, conceptualized by Patricia Hill Collins, Black women remain the most oppressed social group in America, and that the knowledge production, meaning making, and ideas of Black women have been deliberately ignored, dismissed, and disengaged as part of the larger system of social and racial oppression. Collins also posits that developing Black feminist thought as critical social theory involves including the ideas of Black women not previously considered intellectuals, many of whom may be women with jobs outside of academia. So as such, we can argue that members of the Minnesota Lynx and the other WNBA teams are public intellectuals. They are creating meaning and knowledge. So this brings Kimberly Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality to the forefront of how we can understand the reaction to the players' t-shirt wearing in terms of the police officers walking out and the scrutiny the players received after. Crenshaw argues that a woman's multidimensional way of being in life affords an equally multidimensional method of analysis. For this reason, intersectionality is useful for understanding the lives and experiences of minoritized groups in sport and why this matters for the wider society. Because the racial demography of the team is majority Black, the backlash they experienced was exacerbated by their intersecting identities as Black women in sport. Because race is a way of making people up in America and is a fundamental category of disempowerment, the literature suggests that due to the racialization of Black women, they are still at the hands of a racist and sexist society in which they are routinely scrutinized, their bodies under constant surveillance, and their sporting performances routinely dismissed or stereotyped in American media. That's not to say they are not successful in sport. They are. The problem is that their success often takes a back seat. It is often framed and or perceived by society in demeaning ways. For example, during and after the 2016 Olympic Games, gymnast Gabby Douglas received backlash about her hair and not putting her hand over her heart during the national anthem. The fact that the focus was more on what she didn't do rather than what she did do exemplifies the scrutiny and policing of Black women in sport. So it would be rude to talk about athlete activism and not mention Dr. Harry Edwards, because at the end of the day, sport is and can be, quote, a source of potential power for Black people. Edwards paints athlete activism into 4 waves, emphasizing where it has been, what it has done, and where it is going. He concludes that Black athletes have to continue to use their voices to uplift the larger Black community. However, a notable gap in Edwards' book is a discussion on and trajectory of Black female athlete activism. The erasure of Black women in sport and their collective efforts as athletes towards social justice is indicative of the very intersectional oppression that scholars point out. So sport matters in critical and cultural ways. It is not apolitical and cannot, should not be separated from the society in which it operates. Also, Black female athlete activism is largely absent from the conversation in academia, as well as society at large, in spaces such as social media. Moreover, it is overshadowed by Black and white male athlete activism and white female athlete activism. Looking at the literature review, we can identify what is missing: the history, meaning, and social impact of Black female athlete activism. And so, as a minoritized group in society whose intersectional identities mean they have intimate everyday experiences of discrimination, Black sportswomen lie at the crux of athlete activism. That is, this fight was not started by Colin Kaepernick in this new wave of athlete activism. When we think about athlete activism, rarely do we think about the stories, the efforts and work of Black female athletes. Importantly, such a gap in the literature fails to acknowledge and account for how Black women in sport use sport to exert their power and agency in society. If Black women's voices and experiences in sport and the wider society continue to be dismissed, oppression then continues. And thank you for listening.